Hello everybody, welcome to the County Seat today. I'm your host, Chad Booth. We are launching into National Preparedness Month, and that is the time when you think ahead and start making yourself aware of your surroundings and what you have to do in case there's a natural disaster or some other kind of emergency that might require you to do something like evacuate, which is where we're going to focus our conversation today. Right now, let's find out a little bit about emergency preparedness and how all the systems function together.
When there is a disaster, we often forget that being prepared is only part of the equation. Taking protective actions such as drop, cover, and hold on in an earthquake, for example, ensure that you survive to the next step. Each emergency or disaster has its own steps for survival. Sometimes it is necessary to shelter in place. But as we've seen recently in Utah with a number of fires and mudslides affecting homes, there are times when you need to get out, with the possibility that when you return, your home may not be there.
We kept hearing sirens, and that's rare for kind of our area because we started hearing them come up the road. And so my husband came out to check on, make sure everything was okay. And he came back in the house and he's like, I don't know how to tell you this, but the mountain is on fire.
At that point, you may be given a certain amount of time that you have to evacuate. In some cases, in Tooele, the fire that went through Tooele a couple summers ago, they had only had minutes to get out. The fire was sweeping through their homes. All they got out was what they were wearing on their backs. You may have a half an hour. You know, we think about when we're faced with a threat or a danger, something coming our way, we're going to panic, freak out. What, generally speaking, most people do is freeze.
And at that point, I was like, okay, we need to start packing now. And it was more kind of, I'd rather be safe than sorry.
It is in those cases that having a prioritized list of what you need to take during an evacuation can make a big difference after the threat has passed. Items that should be on that list include your 72-hour kit, important documents, IDs, clothing, and items of sentimental value, if there's time.
This takes preparation. We have to do this in advance. Don't wait for an evacuation order to come to start deciding what those things are.
I literally went down the list and was throwing them in, any kind of bag I could get my hand on and was loading up the car.
Police officer came running up our driveway and pretty calmly told us, you need to get out of the house, we're evacuating. We kind of posed the question of, do we have time to pack anything? He said, grab what you can right now and you need to leave.
My heart kind of sank because I'm like, this means we're gonna have to go. And of course I'm crying because it's a little scary.
It didn't really click or register that everything could be gone until after we got to the evacuation center. So it was more of, okay, get the dog, get the car, get the things out of the safe and go.
For the County Seat, I'm Derek Dowsett.
Great story. We're going to pick up with a conversation. We've got an interesting panel of guests today. I think we should be able to cover this from all angles. We'll be right back with our conversations about emergency preparedness and evacuations on the County Seat.
I am the light in the darkness when your loved ones are lost.
I am the one who keeps the halls of justice safe for those who stand trial.
I am the keeper of the jail and safety net for those who have broken the law.
I am more than the enforcer of the laws. I am the protector of public safety.
I am here to serve because you elected me.
Learn more about the office and support your local sheriff by joining the Utah Sheriff's Association.
Hi, I'm Dan Clark, inviting you to the amazing Wendover Air Show on Saturday, September 28th at Wendover Air Base in the heart of beautiful Tooele Valley. Explore modern and vintage aircraft, enjoy fascinating military displays, and thrill to some of the world's best aerobatics, stunt flying, and so much more. Gates open at 9, show starts at 10, goes till 3 p.m. For more information, visit TooeleValley.org. That's the Wendover Air Show in Tooele Valley. So much, so close.
There's a little place on a Utah map where I was raised, where my heart's at, where the sagebrush grows wild and high, and the stars come out at night. Oh, reservation, skiing, starvation, that Duchesne County life.
When you look at the number of disasters in the U.S., chances are every area will deal with some kind of emergency in the next decade. And between school, sports, and social lives, chances are you won't be with your kids when it happens. Will they know what to do? Ready.gov/kids has the educational tools and information to make the conversation easy. When the time comes, chances are they'll feel prepared, not scared. So talk with your family today.
Welcome back to the county seat. We are talking today about evacuations and how they fit into being prepared for emergencies and being on your toes, what you can do, what government's going to do, how it all works together. Joining us for our conversation, Joe Doherty, who is from the Utah Division of Emergency Management. We have Joel Palmer, who is with FEMA, and I'm sorry I didn't quite get the title, Joel.
The FEMA Integration Team Lead for
Integration,
Utah.
that sounds really important. And we have Doug Bitton, who is the Layton City Fire Marshal and in charge of the emergency management for Layton City. Thank you for joining us. Yes. So we've got a nice broad perspective. We've got somebody talking about how federal government plays a role in all this, how the state does it, how local does it. So this should make for a good conversation. So emergency preparedness, you know, we have the great shakeout. We have people talk about their, their emergency packs. We tell people put up their food supplies and all this stuff, but we don't spend a lot of time talking about evacuations, but they seem to keep coming up in the headlines. We've had just 2 in the last few weeks where fire has pushed people out of their homes. Maybe it's even 3, I'm not sure. And then, of course, with the hurricanes and the mass evacuations, how much stress does that put on a community when you've got to order evacuations?
Yeah, well, they can be really stressful situations, and I think really Doug will be a great one to talk about this since he works for Layton City. But people need to be aware that they do have a responsibility to evacuate and to heed those orders when they come. That is probably the most important thing I can tell you and any of your viewers is when you get the order to evacuate, take it seriously and know that it is for your best interest that you obey that order.
You know, the fire that we just recently had, it's called the Snoqualmie fire. It was a Labor Day weekend, Labor Day, and it was a calm day and everything was good for the community, and all of a sudden a fire strikes up on the mountainside. So the close proximity of residents, they're just saying, what now? I was just enjoying a holiday, and then all of a sudden now I have police officers, firefighters knocking on my door saying, you have 2 minutes, we need to have you evacuate. So it's very, during blue skies is a wonderful time just to say, hey, what can I do? What can I do to help prepare myself in case I have to be evacuated? One of the biggest things we want to be sure to admonish to people, which I believe our community did well for that night, is situational awareness. They knew they had a fire. And so as we was knocking on the door, a lot of the residents were starting to get their go kits, their bags, and start to get all ready to go. So it's very important that we need to know our surroundings, how things are, and make sure to react as things are, we observe things.
How important is that emergency kit and knowing precisely what you're going to put in it? What big of a difference does that make? What kind of things should people be thinking about?
You know, it really depends on your situation. Some people may not have to rely on an emergency kit, especially if they have a family that they're going to evacuate to. A lot of Utahns do have family in the area, and so we've been really fortunate to see that even when we've opened shelters, most people end up with family or friends at a nice, safe place. But some of the basic things that you want to think about, what are the creature comforts that you need? A little bit of food, a little bit of water, a toothbrush, some deodorant, some medicines, exactly. Both for men and for women, there are specific ones. If there's any specific prescription you have, make sure that you have that coming with you in your emergency kit, and maybe some extra money, cash, those kinds of things, so that just you have the ability to have flexibility and to make some decisions. If you end up at a shelter, then you are prepared just to function a little bit better.
Well, and a couple of the other things, if you've got pets, you need something to carry your pet in, food for them, anything that's going to require, and one that my wife and I are just coming to terms with. If you've got kids, we had a great kit that we put together for the 2 of us, and now there's 3 of us. So now we've got all of the extra things that you need with a young child that we have to make sure we have in a place we can grab it and head out if necessary.
And you know what those kids do? They grow.
Yes.
So they grow
you
up.
keep taking everything out.
Exactly. And we during the first Great Utah Shakeout, we learned that people had opened up their kits for the first time in 15 years, and those clothes they had packed for their 2-year-old no longer fit their now 17-year-old kid. So, yeah, it's a good idea.
What's a binky doing in here?
Yes, go review those kits. Absolutely.
I know actually a friend of mine, a guy I worked with for a number of years who works out of the FEMA Hawaii office, he has had to work with his kids to make sure that they stop taking the comfort items, specifically some of the snacks that they have. If they've run out of snacks in the house, they'll start sneaking them out of the kit. And he's like, you know, well, if we have to go evacuate for a hurricane, you're going to want that stuff in the kit. So if you're going to take it, at least let us know.
So how different? You know, I've watched hurricanes for years, and you see you start seeing the news reports about the hurricanes coming, and then the next thing you hear is they're all out of water, they're all out of fuel, they're all out of plywood, because I guess everybody waits. Wouldn't you think that that people would start thinking about this stuff and have a water supply long before the run on the store?
Yeah, unfortunately, you're not going to hear those stories, because those are the stories where people are just doing the normal thing, and they get to go live their lives because they planned ahead. And that's where we'd love to encourage people to think about planning ahead for these things, so that you don't become part of the tragic story of the people who are running out of water and running out of plywood and can't evacuate because they have waited so long. Learning to just pay attention to the news, pay attention to your local alerts, and signing up for your local alert system. Those are all things that will help you make the very best decision when the knock comes at the door, when the fire's coming down the hill, or when the flood is on its way.
You know, and it's really easy. It's really easy for the public members. You don't need to spend a lot of money to prepare for emergencies. You get a lot of your stuff at a local dollar store. Plenty of places to be able to get that readiness ready. And one of the things too is just try to mark a time and get into a routine. I always tell people, remember the rule of 2. Take 20 minutes, all right, maybe on the second week of the month, or whenever it is, and do a preparedness level. Where are we at on things? Do an assessment. Get ready.
Okay. Got a lot of other questions about things you need to pack up. One, before we take a break, what about documents? Are those important things to have cornered and accessible? Has anybody ever lost their house because they couldn't find the deed, because it got burned or it got lost?
I don't know about losing the property, but I do know it's often a problem in some of the larger disasters that FEMA works, is if you are going to apply for individual assistance where you're getting some direct support for yourself and your family, they're going to start asking for your deed, your insurance paperwork, all of those kinds of things. So it's something a lot of folks I know have moved to a digital copy of things, whether you're keeping it on your phone or somewhere in a secure drive on the cloud, just a way to be able to access those documents that you don't have to worry about on grabbing the fire safe as you're running out of the door.
And that is one of the themes this month for National Preparedness Month, is preparing your documents. And if people go to ready.gov/September, they can read all about all of those tips specifically about preparing your documents, helping prepare your children, and on for this month.
All right, we got to take a break here. We've got more things to talk about. Good conversation about being prepared for that emergency, that knock on the door. We'll delve back into what you say when the knock comes when we come back on the County Seat.
When you look at the number of disasters in the U.S., chances are every area will deal with some kind of emergency in the next decade. And between school, sports, and social lives, chances are you won't be with your kids when it happens. Will they know what to do? Ready.gov/kids has the educational tools and information to make the conversation easy. When the time comes, chances are they'll feel prepared, not scared. So talk with your family today.
Welcome back to the county seat. We are talking about National Preparedness Month, and we've been talking about evacuations in particular. So I want to ask the question, because we heard stories about this at Dollar Ridge, and we've heard stories about this, in other fires or flood problems in Utah, is that when the knock comes to the door on an evacuation, people say you have to leave. Some people say no. So, what can you do what should people know about not wanting to leave their home?
Yeah. Well, you guys had a pretty good time evacuating people in Snoqualmie fire, right?
We did. We had a wonderful cooperation, but there is some that actually do say, no, I'm not going to obey the order. And that is devastating to us as public service. We just want to help them as much as we can, and they don't know the peril of their life that could possibly be at the time. So it is very important. We make these evacuation orders not just as a simple convenience or time. When it's mandatory, it's mandatory.
So there's a debate. People say, well, so what if it's mandatory and I choose not to? I mean,
so state code is really interesting, and it actually addresses this issue, that a local chief executive officer, like a mayor or a police chief, can order an evacuation. If you disobey that order, that can lead to a Class B misdemeanor. So that is one possible penalty. The other one, like Doug mentioned, is the peril of your own life, that you have dedicated government servants who are coming to your home to say, it is time for you to leave for your own safety. And you might choose to stay and end up as might end up dead. Might end up as one of the fatalities. And we saw this happen during the Wood Hollow fire in Sanpete County in 2012. A resident chose not to leave and died in his car. And these are the tragedies that our law enforcement and our firefighters, they want to avoid. The other thing to remember is when you're being told to evacuate, that a mandatory evacuation means that the first responders are not coming back to get you, that they have to leave as well, because we want to keep them alive. We want them to keep doing their job and keeping us safe. And it's not fair to make them be in danger just because you don't want to go.
I'm just trying to imagine somebody standing in front of the judge and say, well, it's either going to be a Class B misdemeanor or the death penalty. You know what? I don't want either. I'm going to go.
You can't play the clock when it's a mandatory evacuation. Things could cascade on you so fast, and you won't make it.
Which leads me to the next question: how do you guys decide when to pull the trigger from a voluntary evacuation to a mandatory? What's the criteria?
Yeah, that's always a local decision. That's where we.
It is. We look at things. We have management teams that are right on the spot that we say, hey, what's the behavior of this fire or whatever the incident is? What's going to impact the people? We need to get that message out in a bump up time, so there's plenty of time for that evacuation. And while we're doing that, we're making sure that those evacuees have a place to go. And so it's a lot of decision making in a quick, rapid pace of time. But we want to make sure that threshold of time's there.
So that kind of leads me to another question. We're telling citizens that they need to prepare. They need to do things in advance to be ready for an evacuation. I guess the same holds true for state, local, and federal government. What do you guys do to prepare for a disaster you don't know what it's going to be?
That's what we think about every single day. Our worst case scenario is this earthquake that's not going to give us a lick of warning before it happens. And so that's why we prepare every single day. We go through drills. We're working on catastrophic earthquake planning with FEMA right now. We've had a series of meetings with our partners there to talk about how bad is this thing going to be? How can we make sure that the recovery resources are going to be able to get to our state and then get around our state. So we're in constant planning. We have food and water stored at our office. We have emergency kits at our office so that we're ready to respond and recover if we need to.
Well, and following up on the plan for the earthquake, we're also in the process right now of developing a fairly large-scale exercise once we have that plan. So it's about 2 years out, but in 2021, we'll be running it's referred to as a national level exercise. So there'll be a lot of the federal assets and a lot of the Defense Department assets and a lot of the state assets and local and county and everybody getting together for a few days to really walk through what that earthquake would look like, what those first couple of days would look like, so that if it hits, we have some of those initial conversations already ready to go.
You do practice? Do you guys practice in Lincoln City?
We need to. If part of the granting cycle and everything, we need to have exercise and practice and everything else. And the main thing is that situational awareness. If we can have the public members just walk through their homes saying, okay, if an earthquake does happen, do I have things anchored down? You know, if there's a flood, do I have an escape route? Do I have the go kit? If we have a wildland fire, you know, can I ready my neighborhood, my homes around me, separation of, you know, distance of vegetation, clean the gutters and underneath window soffits and things like that, just to make sure that we're ready. That situational awareness can do wonders in a preparedness level.
And that's perfect. When Doug talks about awareness, how are you going to find out that it's time for you to evacuate? There are numerous channels for that. Sometimes it's going to be a knock at the door. It could be a law enforcement vehicle driving through your neighborhood using its public address system. But one thing that people should be aware of is that almost every community in this state has a notification system, and they need to contact their sheriff's office and find out, how do I sign up so that I can be notified if something is going to happen. We have a bunch of communities in our state that rely on a subscription system like that. But we also have the ability to alert you by sending an alert directly to your cell phone, something that you have not had to subscribe to. And it sounds very much like the emergency alert system that you hear on the TV that interrupts your favorite soap opera sometimes. And your phone will make that sound as well. And we're working on enhancing the ability to send those alerts in the state. It's called a wireless emergency alert. If you've ever received an Amber Alert in the state, then you know that you're capable of receiving those alerts right on your phone. And those are geo-targeted alerts. So we can draw a box around a city and say, alert all the cell phones in this area. And that's a very fast way, but people need to be aware when they get that alert, that is coming from an actual alerting authority. You need to pay attention. It's just like someone knocking at your door.
We can take one more quick break. When we come back, let's talk about, you know, your decision-making process and how that affects an evacuation. We'll be right back on the county seat.
If you're looking for gold at the end of the rainbow, you'll probably be disappointed, because in Paiute County, the only thing you'll find at the end of a rainy day is the promise of adventure. Highway 89 is your access point through Marysville and the historic trails of Bouillon Canyon. Find yourself in the mountains one minute and the desert the next as you follow in the footsteps of the pioneers. Whitewater raft, fish, hike, all within a few minutes of a comfortable bed and a warm meal. Find out why the world has made Paiute County its off-road destination. Paiute County, the place where the rainbow ends.
I promised my son that if he got straight A's, we would take a guy's trip, just the two of us. We were riding on a trail outside a place called Minersville, Utah. There was so much to explore, and the trail just kept climbing higher, right to the top of a mountain called Jack's Peak. We just stood there with the whole world below us, not saying much. In fact, not a word. Later, my son turned to me and said, "I love you, Dad." Suddenly, I realized we weren't just camping, we were connecting.
Hi, I'm Dan Clark, inviting you to the amazing Wendover Air Show on Saturday, September 28th at Wendover Air Base in the heart of beautiful Twila Valley. Explore modern and vintage aircraft, enjoy fascinating military displays, and thrill to some of the world's best aerobatics, stunt flying, and so much more. Gates open at 9, show starts at 10, goes till 3 p.m. For more information, visit TwillaValley.org. That's the Wendover Air Show in Twila Valley. So much, so close.
When you look at the number of disasters in the U.S., chances are every area will deal with some kind of emergency in the next decade. And between school, sports, and social lives, chances are you won't be with your kids when it happens. Will they know what to do? Ready.gov/kids has the educational tools and information to make the conversation easy. When the time comes, chances are they'll feel prepared, not scared. So talk with your family today.
Welcome back to the county seat. We are talking today about emergency preparedness and the evacuation function. So obviously, you don't want to create mass panic and have everybody in an entire city have to evacuate at once. So usually, I guess the procedure is to say, okay, we take this first line, the second line. How do you know when it's time to pull those triggers?
That'd be.
Well, again, the dynamics of whatever the event is happening at the time, making sure if we have a public impact, we want to have that readiness level early on. And so, yeah, we need to make sure it's released as quick as possible.
Is it ever possible for conditions to change so quickly that your plans can backfire on you?
Absolutely. I mean, we've seen really tragic wildfires happen where, for example, in Paradise, California, where as they're trying to alert the community, the infrastructure that they rely on for sending the messages is getting destroyed by the fire. So yeah, you can have the best plan until you're in the heat of battle and it turns out this plan is not working. And so, I don't necessarily fault the local sheriff's office for their decisions, because I think they were in a horrible decision making,
They're in a bad paradigm.
It was a very bad paradigm. So, but at the same time, those things can happen.
Many of the communities in the Wasatch Front in Utah have these downslope winds, have the characteristics of a problem that could occur really fast and switch really fast.
Okay, what's the one thing that people watching this show today need to know so that they can be better prepared for an evacuation?
Make a plan. Be sure to make a plan, an evacuation plan. Make sure to get that ready and also practice it. That would be my takeaway.
If you have to leave, shut off your air conditioning so your home does not continue to suck in soot and ash and smoke and damage the inside of your home.
How about doors? Should they close their doors on
Close your doors too.
Close your doors is wonderful.
Okay, very good. Well, we thank you for joining us on the county seat. Local government is where your life happens. It's the level of government that affects your life the most. County seat is dedicated to try and bring you that information on a regular basis that helps you make better decisions and be more engaged in that process. There's a lot of information that runs on our social media that we don't have time for on the show. If you want to truly stay abreast, we invite you to sign up for our social media. Follow us on Twitter, follow us on Facebook, and follow us on YouTube, and you can find out a lot more and review this information we've given you today. So we'll see you next week on the County Seat.